Hello, community, and welcome back to another Keeping It Real with Dr. Anita podcast. I am your host, Dr. Anita Polite Wilson, C-Suite Trusted Advisor, Board Director, and Team Dynamics Strategist, helping prepare businesses to navigate culture, complexity, and change. We are back for our fourth in a series of real conversations from the C-Suite with Terri Wilson, founder and CEO of Doing HR Differently. And this month, we have been talking about discussing hot topics without torching relationships. Terri, thank you so much for coming back. This has been really good.
Thank you, Anita. I'm loving every minute of it.
I think we are giving the community some good coaching tips, some things to think about. In our first conversation, we talked about avoiding volatility by valuing the relationship. In our second conversation, we talked about delivering a message that could be received versus necessarily delivering a message that we feel is right. In our last conversation, we talked about managing intent and impact, specific to, is your goal to be dismissive? Probably not, but sometimes we come off that way. Is your goal to be distracting, to just say something and leave it? Probably not, but sometimes we can come off that way. Is our goal to have a debate, or is our goal to have a real discussion? And one of the ways that we said that we could do that is maybe even thinking about how you want to have that discussion, the rules of engagement, if you will. So, community, we kicked off this series by talking about the fact that typically in October, I like to have a panel to discuss what's scary about DEI. And we know that the diversity landscape has changed quite a bit in the last year. We know about the Supreme Court ruling on college campuses, and now businesses more and more are stepping away from their initial commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging since George Floyd's murder in 2020. So when we talk about reframing the DEIB landscape, I came across something that may be new to some and not new to others. It was new to me, and even though I'm in this work, I'm proud of the fact that I'm always learning. And what someone shared with me was this: diversity is a fact, equity is a choice, inclusion is an action, and belonging is an outcome. So in the spirit of having hot topic discussions without torching relationships, I want to end the series specifically talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And Terri, I'd like to hear from you some techniques we can have to recognize what might be getting in the way for our discussion partner.
Yeah, Anita, this is one of those topics that I started working with in the mid-90s. And it was interesting because I could have made a lot of money on diversity training, but I would never do that unless the company had a strategy. And so I've kind of dabbled in it throughout, but the way that I approach it is usually through culture, because companies who say, okay, DEI, it's like this set aside. And so I think the reason you see so many companies backing away is because it's viewed as a set aside instead of viewed as this is part of your culture. This is what you live. And so when I think about why this hasn't advanced the way that, we think it could and it should, I like to think about why, instead of why hasn't it, why don't we have it? Because I think we should have it, right? Because like you said, diversity is a fact, it's already there. So why don't things move forward? Well, one, people might not think it's relevant. Doesn't affect me. So, why should I do it? I don't see it. It's not a problem. Two, it's a threat. It's like, I don't know what I don't know, and I don't want to know what I don't know. And then I think for me, the big thing that's always there is power. What kind of power do you think you have to share or you have to give up? And we all know that people don't willingly give up power. So there's a reason why these things are happening. There's a reason why these things are not happening. And honestly, for me, I like to think of abundance. There's room for everybody. It doesn't have to be either or. We need to spend more time on and diversity is a fact. It's not going anywhere. Equity is a choice. Inclusion. What was inclusion?
Inclusion is an action and belonging is an outcome.
Absolutely. I love how that flows. And so think about why those things aren't happening And you can't look at an organization and just speak organizationally. This is happening on an individual basis because that organization is made up of individuals who are making decisions.
You mentioned what's getting in the way. And, you know, when I talk to clients about this, rarely do I give them data points. And I will tell them, I'm not going to tell you anything that you can't find on Google. There's plenty of data points as to why you should. My question for my clients, and similar to yours, is what's your why not? And you're right. Is it a power thing? Is it a policy thing? Is it a procedure thing? What's your why not? And going back to what we said in the last conversation about when you want to have any kind of challenging conversation, it's about delivering a message that can be received versus delivering a message that you feel is right. Something else that I like to remember in terms of my goal is it's not about reaching agreement with anyone. It's about raising awareness. Because once awareness is raised and people have a chance to turn it over in their minds and think about how they behaved in the past and the different outcomes that they might want to have in the future, then you might get to agreement in certain areas. But it's first about raising awareness. Yeah. And so, Terri, when we talk about that, raising awareness also begs the question, what do I need to do? So tell us about that. People need to, you believe, and I agree with you, that people need to reflect on the work that they need to do. Say more about that.
Yeah, you know what? Thank you. You reminded me of a situation that I think is really important to share. And I think it's going to hit all those points that we've been talking about. Had a client and they were well known for the diversity in their work, in their workforce. However, if you start to peel back the onions, the diversity wasn't as prevalent as it was portrayed to be. And I remember having a conversation with a VP about just the workforce in his area. It was not very diverse. And I mean, we just went back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And I remember maybe 4 days later, I was traveling and I get a call at 8 o'clock in the morning and the VP says, I get it. I'm like, what do you get? And he said, I get that I have hired people, I have groomed people so that the pipeline looks and feels a certain way. And I really want to finish with this pipeline and then start doing this. And I said, no. I said, no. But here's the point. He tracked me down and he said, I get it. Yeah. And that was huge because, to your point, unless people get it, they're just being told what they should be doing. Versus when you get it, you know that there's value in doing this. And so I think it's so important. We have to stop shoulding people, right? Yeah. Should. Because as soon as people hear should, the wall goes up. Help people understand, raise their awareness. Honestly, sharing stories is huge. And I think in corporate, I'm not in corporate America anymore. And I feel so much freer to share my stories. And that's how people connect. They connect through stories. And believe me, there are a lot of stories out there. Your story doesn't have to be mine. Mine doesn't have to be yours. But these stories are important. And again, this isn't to make people feel bad. This is to let you know my experience. Let me share my experience. And so when I think about an organization, I'm looking at the culture. How does the culture crave this or not crave this, right? And the workforce that's coming in now, they have a very different expectation, very different expectation. And so they want to see themselves throughout the organization, not just in the lower levels, but in the upper levels. And how does that work when your upper levels have been built a certain way for years? And of course, no one expects for it to be blown up. But there are so many things you can do to start to embrace what already exists in your organization. Hopefully, what exists in your organization. Does it make sense?
It does, and I think it's critical that we acknowledge the importance of the frontline levels of organizations, whether it's the staff or the leadership. The front lines, if you think about front lines in terms of battle, those are the ones that are taking the hits and taking the blows so that the people making the decisions are safe, right? And so when we think about frontline, either in staff or leadership, they're seeing what's happening. They have the experience on the ground, that the generals up above just don't have anymore. And so their feedback, their input is just as valuable and insightful as those that are making the decisions. And if those that are making the decisions are going to understand the culture all the way through to the front lines, then it's time to start bringing some folks up from the front lines as it makes sense in terms of succession planning. So I agree with you 100%.
Well, and Anita, can I also, you mentioned something about work. So
Yes.
this takes work, and relationships require work. Anything of real value requires work.
That's
And
right.
so there's work that we need to do. Terri Wilson, as an individual, I need to do my work. And I hope through this series of podcasts that you've heard, oh, she's doing some work. It's really important for you to understand the work you need to do. And that is not a bad thing. That is a beautiful thing, because that means you are growing. And then as an organization, there's work that an organization needs to do. So we shouldn't have this false expectation that we arrive. We never arrive. We just keep moving, right? So what's the work you personally need to do? What is the work that the organization needs to do to receive what already exists?
I think that doing the work is a great way to end this series. And typically when I'm working with clients, whether it's an individual or a team, I ask them to do the work with a 30-day action plan. And in that 30-day action plan, they have to take something that they've learned and figure out one action that they are going to continue for 30 days to really solidify that learning. So Terri, I'm going to ask you to co-coach with me for our community. And what I ask people to do is think about what they're going to start, stop, do more of, or do less of. So I'm going to ask you to take the last two, do more of or do less of, but I'm going to set this up for you. So community, the learning that we want you to take away from this is having hot topic discussions without torching relationships. What can you stop doing? Well, you can stop coming with a closed mind. What can you start doing? You can start coming with an open heart. Terri, what do you think we can do more of? What do you think we can do less of to make sure that when we're discussing hot topics, we don't torch our relationships?
Great. What can you do more of? You can ask more questions and really listen. You can quiet your inner mind so that you can receive what the other person is saying. You can know what your triggers are and do what you need to do to de-escalate them. What can you, was that more of? Yeah. What can you do less of? Honestly, it's just the opposite of that. It's, again, stop assuming, check it out, right? Stop doing all the talking, do more listening. Understand, I want to go back to the first point that we made in the podcast. Do I value the relationship? Because if I value the relationship, I should manage my behaviors to support that. So quite honestly, I love those questions. Start, stop, do more of, do less of. If you just ask yourself those questions on a regular basis, you give yourself more options versus just going with default behaviors that may not be serving you well.
And here's the best part, community. You only have to do one of those over 30 days. You only have to stop being closed-minded and just be really mindful of that for 30 days. You only have to start being more open-hearted and just focus on that for 30 days. You can do more of listening and asking questions for 30 days. That's it. Or you can do less of making assumptions for 30 days. We're not asking you to do all four. Just pick one that's going to work for you and focus on that for 30 days so that you can discuss hot topics without torching relationships. Terri Wilson, thank you so much for being my guest, president, founder of Doing HR Differently. Terri, if someone wants to get a hold of you to continue the dialogue and maybe work with you, how do they do that? What's your website?
Well, thank you, Anita. This has been a game changer for me. So website is doinghdifferently.com. You can email me at terri@doinghdifferently.com, and you can text me or call at 657-527-0705. Anita, thank you for the opportunity. I've loved every moment of it, and I hope it's been a game changer for a lot of people.
I'm sure it will be. And community, Terri and I are thinking about taking this on the road. So if you'd like to work with us together, reach out to either one of us and we will definitely make something happen. Thank you so much for being with me for this month. Again, typically it's about what's scary about diversity, inclusion, and belonging. But this month, because we're leading up to the election, I felt it was really important to help give you some tools to discuss hot topics without torching relationships. If this series of podcasts was helpful to you, please share it with your network and stay in the flow with me. Follow, like, and overshare any conversation that helps you reframe diversity or any hot topic conversation from difficult to different. Until next time, this is Dr. Anita reminding you to stay blessed, keep it real, and go vote.